pharmacist, basically. Now, there's a lot more detail in between that whole story.
Right. Don't worry. We're going to get it out. We're going to get it out. We're going to get it out. But
that's the elevator pitch.
There we go. And what an elevator pitch, because we're going to, without going into too much detail on who, you were working with when it comes to the pharmaceutical company, I have a lot of questions with that. Obviously, we all just came out of a pandemic. We came out of a pandemic that was pretty divisive. Divisive in, how to treat certain things, divisive in, how people should be allowed or forced to, do certain things, take certain medicines. And you having that background, I want to dive into a little bit more how you think about, like, what are your feelings on the overall pharmaceutical industry? Because to make the transition from pharmaceuticals to mental health, I'm wondering, as pharmaceuticals is supposed to be healthcare, right? It's supposed to be caring, for somebody's health. Mental health, we obviously know that that's caring for somebody's mental health. But what I want to dig in a little deeper as far as with the pharmaceuticals.
Yeah. And I just wanted to add, by the way, one thing I forgot to mention. So I moved from New Jersey after getting married, and now I'm in the West Coast, living in Oregon at this time, where I've been the last 4 or 5 years or so.
So your mental health has improved. That's what you're saying.
In some ways it has. Other ways I'm not so sure.
But no, please continue. Sorry for throwing you off.
It's, in my opinion, the pharmaceutical industry is very complicated, especially sorting these things out in today's society where there seems to be a lot of black and white thinking, where things have to be either all this way or all that way. And all the subtleties and nuances is really being lost in the discourse, the discussions. So, for example, on one side, there's some individuals who might feel that pharmaceutical companies are purely evil and are purely out for gain and profit and self-interest, right? On the other side, there might be people who have the exact opposite extreme view, right? That pharmaceutical companies are the best thing in the world and they're going to save everybody, and we should, you should go out right away and take whatever medication they throw at you. Those are two extreme views. So as a member of the Baha'i faith and as a former engineer scientist and as a mental health therapist now, and just as a human being, I always try to look for where the truth is to the best of my ability, knowing that I don't possess the truth. I don't have the truth, but I try my best progressively to look for it wherever it is. There's a lot of problems in the pharmaceutical industry that I saw when I was there. Part of the issue, I think, is that the pharmaceutical industries, this goes into a much wider systemic thing, David, and just stop me if we don't want to go into this area.
No, we want to go there.
It goes into a much bigger societal systemic thing. Pharmaceutical industries are informed by the medical disease model. And this is a model that essentially says whenever you have an illness or a disease, that illness or disease is primarily biological in nature. And the only thing that can cure a disease or an illness is a drug, is a pill or a drug, according to this philosophy. And this is deeply, deeply embedded and baked into our medical system. Okay, so the people who are prescribing these medications are not the pharmacies, they're the doctors. Okay, so it's all connected. So the pharmacies are, I feel, taking advantage of patient vulnerabilities a lot of the time. For example, in the area of cancer, if you're sick and you're dying of a, stage 3 type of lymphoma or particular type of cancer, and there's only 1 or 2 medications on the market available to treat that cancer, and those medications cost $20,000 a month, you've got 2 choices. From what you're told, either you die or you take the medication and that gives you some hope or extends your life. What do you do? And so
most
the
people are going to try to scratch and do whatever they can to pay all that money, go in debt, and then things just go downhill from there.
Yeah, Yeah, right. But it's not realistic for people paying these kinds of exorbitant fees and prices. It seems to be the case that there's a lot of price gouging going on in this industry, and they charge ridiculous prices for a lot of things because they can. The simple reason that they can. So in a sense, it's taking advantage of someone else's vulnerability. So these are some of the negative aspects. One thing I observed directly in the industry when I was there over 7 or 8 years, David, when you develop a new drug, it's a big black box. It's a big mystery as to where the price comes from. I was working with directors. I was an engineer, but I was working with the directors, and we'd have board meetings with various executives of the company where I worked. And during my entire 8-year time, we launched a few new cancer medicines. Nobody could tell you where the price came from. The price was a few $1,000s per dose, and a dose is 1 vial. You take 1 dose a month. I'm talking like tens of thousands of dollars for a dose. And whenever you ask, how did we come up with this price, it was a very strange response that you would get from people. Nobody had a clear answer from where this price came from. It almost looked like they pulled it out of thin air and just said, let's charge $20,000. That sounds good. Because it certainly wasn't based on the manufacturing cost. Because if you calculated the cost of manufacturing or producing, and I was directly involved in a lot of that, some of these medications, the price does not justify the cost. The price is way, way, way higher than what it takes to actually make the medication. Now, to be fair, it is very expensive to produce pharmaceuticals. They're not cheap. But still, relatively speaking, when you compare the prices that are being charged compared to the price that it takes to manufacture and produce these things, a lot of the times, it just doesn't add up.
And you touched on something, when you're talking about pricing, to me, being in healthcare, I deal more on the surgery side, orthopedic surgeons, those type of surgeries. And whenever I talk to a family member about going to see a doctor, most people have this, you just think that doctors are honest. Everybody in healthcare super honest. If they say take this pill, take this pill. I remember being down in South Carolina with my uncles and aunts, and they were having a discussion over dinner about all the pills that they take for certain things. And I'm sitting here thinking, like, you just ordered fried chicken. You just ordered all this fried stuff. You're eating all this stuff. I said, the medicine is the food. Like, stop eating the food. You're taking medicine to eat the food, and nobody's telling you. And the doctor's not telling you to just don't eat this food.
Right.
And because they trust their doctor so much, that's what makes it so dangerous to me, whether it's a pharmaceutical company or anybody else in healthcare, because these are supposed to be trusted sources. It's not supposed to be business first and that be prioritized when it comes to healthcare, at least from a moral perspective, I would think.
I would completely agree with that. Right? But the issue becomes, it's kind of like, okay, well, where do you draw the line? Because there are some medicines that are legitimate for certain illnesses or diseases that are legit. How do you tell the difference? How do you tell the difference between how do you sort through this to tell the difference between the nonsense, things that are pushed that might not be necessary, that you might not need, versus something that is a legitimate medicine that you might actually need, that can save your life or improve the quality of your life, right? So that's the other side of the argument, the other side of the equation, that there obviously is, you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. So there are obvious problems within the pharmaceutical industry, and we're just touching upon the tip of the iceberg here, by the way. There's tons and tons of problems with this industry, in my opinion. But do they still do some good for humanity? Yeah, they do. They do. They do produce a lot of medicines that help lots and lots of people. So it's not a clear yes or no. It's not a clear good versus evil story, right? As many things in life are not.
And that goes back to the black and white that you initially spoke about,
right?
Where one person may be on one side because, and a lot of it comes down to what is our experience? What is our experience showing us? So me, when I know that I've seen You know, if I see a bunch of orthopedic surgeons all the time scrambling to make money and talking about reimbursements rather than them talking about their patient's recovery, in my head, it's always, you know, drilled in to where now when my parents go to see an orthopedic surgeon and they say, oh, you may have to have surgery, or, oh, you may have, no, you don't have to have surgery. They're lying, you know, and it's like, I can't, you know, I know great orthopedic surgeons. Obviously, you know, Pete's one of them. But I can't trust that every single doctor is going to be like Pete. So it's like, how, like you said, how do we figure out what's good for us, what's bad for us?
Right.
Like how? That's
an excellent question. And I mean, I don't have the answer to that, but all I can do is share a few thoughts. I grapple with that question a lot in different areas of life. You know, the issue of trust, a lot of it really comes down to trust, because we're living in a society that is very phony, or it seems to be very phony or inauthentic in a lot of ways. And so trust is a very authentic thing. It's the exact opposite of inauthenticity or being disingenuous. When you trust somebody, you know, there's something there. You might have love for that person, or you trust them enough to the point where you're letting that person lay you down on an operating table and open your body up and cut you up and do a surgery. I mean, that is a ridiculous level of trust to put into another human being.
It is.
Right? So when that gets tied up with selfish interest and selfish motives, like wanting to maximize profit or do surgeries because you get $40,000, $50,000 for a surgical procedure, that becomes a problem. So now we're getting into the area of, for me, you know, materialism, and how our social economic system drives and fuels a lot of these attitudes, because medicine used to be an art. Healing used to be an art. It used to be an art for me back in the day. Doctors would do home visits. They would go to people's homes and meet with their families and have dinner with them and talk to them. They were integrated into the community. When you were sick in bed, they would come to your room by your bedside. Those were the days where medicine was an art. Now, I'm not a doctor, but I'm just making some comments here, you know? And a lot of these services have been commodified. They're turned into business-making enterprises. So it becomes difficult to separate out the selfish interests of somebody wanting to just make money versus the actual pure service of trying to actually help another human being or uplift another human being or serve another human being, not because you want anything from them, but because it's in your heart. That's what you want to do. It all gets tangled up.
Yeah, it does. And everything that you said, it's the greed. You know, it's what our society pushes. It's what we've normalized in so many different ways. And when you do think about what medicine used to be, or the relationships that you used to have with your doctor, now you don't even have that. You know, it's, you know, nothing against City MD, but I don't know the last time that I saw an internal, you know, my internalist, you know, for my primary care needs. I just go to City MD.
Right.
You know, and everything is just being bought out by larger systems. We're controlled by, you know, who's in network, who's out of network. You know, we're making decisions for our health that are not prioritized by health decisions. You know, it's other factors that are factoring in. So